Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good night, and welcome to a webinar presented by Capture Higher Ed. I'm excited that you have decided to join us today to talk about the topic of recruiting sophomores and juniors and also transfers. Now, this is part 2 of a series that we are doing on digital nurturing strategies, and we are excited today to be able to talk through these 3 populations specifically, but if you want more information, I would recommend that you go back and listen to how we presented relative to seniors and influencer markets. What brought you here today? Well, it might have been an advertisement that said these 3 things. What does it take to convert these underclassmen to a hand-raising inquiry? How do we effectively nurture? And how much value, after all, should we be placing on these audiences given this crazy enrollment cycle that we're in, that we're calling 2020, 2021? We're going to address these 3 questions today and hopefully give a whole bunch of pointers on how you can do it better. Let me introduce myself and my co-host. My name is Jamie Gleason, and I am the director of undergraduate initiatives here at Capture Higher Ed, and I get the privilege today to be joined by one of my colleagues and the creative director, Sara Ekart. Will you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi, I'm Sara Ekart. I am the director of creative operations here at Capture. I've been in higher ed for over 10 years, and I've worked with over 100 institutions, primarily in creative marketing and design. So I'm excited to talk about this today.
This is great. And I'll just say, I'm just going to give Sara some kudos here. You've got with you the person who really runs air traffic control when it comes to creative at Capture. For those of you who have seen our stuff, Sara is the creative prowess that is the backbone of our group there. She oversees all of our graphic designers. So let's get right into it. Today we're going to talk about these items, but really you might be asking yourself the question first. If you're not familiar with who Capture is, let me just give you a very quick elevator speech about who we are and what we do in this market of higher education. So Capture is the only company that combines marketing automation with predictive modeling in order to reach your goals. And today we're going to talk specifically about some of those goals. And you might be asking yourself, well, how do you know my goals? The goals of higher ed are fairly universal, and they are as follows. Identify your audience, convert that audience, and then enroll that audience. And these are the 3 critical essentials that we want to cover today in order to get you where you need to go. Obviously, when we're talking about underclassmen, we're not going to be able to enroll an underclassman this year, but we can do a lot of work in identifying and converting, and that's really where we're going to spend a lot of our time. Capture is inventing a category. We are defining behavioral intelligence in the market of higher education. And you, again, hopefully are asking, behavioral intelligence. I've heard people talk about behaviors. I've heard people talk about data and behavior. But what is the intelligence, the part of that? It's really this collection and the use of the data that we have in order to predict human behavior to influence specific and important outcomes, a la the goals that we just talked about on the last slide. So to identify, to convert, and to enroll. How do we do this? Well, the company as a whole is made up of 4 primary behavioral intelligence products: engage, apply, aid, and enroll. And we use these products strategically, and we integrate other solutions, digital solutions, in order to maximize and optimize these services. And we do this all through individuals, right? We have a company that's made up of a very unique team that has a lot of skills. And you're going to hear some of those skills with Sara today on the creative side, but we also have data scientists. We have previous directors of enrollment as account executives. We have all sorts of project management and communications people that work for us. You name it, Capture is rich with resources. And as we like to say in-house, we have a whole team of subject matter experts. And you today are going to hear from at least one of them. And even though some people call me the subject matter expert in some things, Sara is definitely the subject matter expert in creative. So let's jump right into it. you're asking yourself, we're actually going to start with the third point first, because the question might be in your head, how much value should we be placing on these other audiences? And the reason this is a great question is because this year, 2020, has been a doozy, right? We've seen things happen, shortages, backlogs, all of these different items that are really like maybe forcing you to ask, should I put my emphasis on adult education? Should I be thinking more about grad? Should I really be focusing on transfers or underclassmen when really the need might be in another area? Obviously, the word focus by default really means that you have to put aside some in order to pay attention to the most important. And what I want to raise today is the question that, yes, you should be paying attention to these audiences. Mainly because this year has been so interesting. And let me just emphasize what I'm talking about. We've heard statistics. We've seen the numbers. If you're in an enrollment office right now, you're living the fact that undergrad enrollment as a whole is down 4%. We're seeing in community colleges that undergrad that enrollment this year is down 9%, which is an interesting statistic. And we're going to talk about that a little bit toward the future. But ultimately what this means is that if community college enrollment is down, then future transfer enrollment is going to be down, which means you might need to pay more attention to transfers than you have in the past. And then overall, we're seeing a trend that overall freshmen are just down 16% across all institution types. These statistics are from the Clearinghouse, and they all have a big impact on how we should be thinking about next year, because next year might be the makeup year for this year. So that means keeping your foot on the gas, both for fall 21 and for future cohorts, is going to be very, very important. The way we're going to do this is through digital. Obviously, as we know, if you're on campus right now, you're one of the lucky few. There is a huge delta that exists right now in terms of proximity, and we can't get students on campus in a lot of cases. We certainly can't get them on campus the way that we have before. So digital is the tool that we're going to work with in order to really continue to drive the brand and in order to get those conversions that we need to get a student to ultimately enroll. So the digital strategy that we're going to talk about, as I define it, is this. A series of digital communications designed to interact and to respond to the behavior that the consumer has shown already. So give an example, Jamie, if you don't mind. Okay, student is from a state, they click on certain type of message, and we want to respond to that message ultimately to convert them through this cultivation, through a message cultivation. And if our goal is to convert through cultivation, then I entreat you to make your campaigns personalized and textured in order to keep the attention of the audience that we're talking about. Okay, man, I like get really revved up on when I'm doing webinars. So let's jump right into the point number one, and I'm going to welcome Sara back to the screen as we talk through these things. The impact, what we want to do, first of all, is pay attention to those points of conversion. For underclassmen, for instance, we cannot endeavor to get that student to apply because in most cases the application isn't open or it shouldn't be open because it's just not time yet. So the number of conversions that are possible with an underclassman relative to a senior are different, right? We don't want to get them from app to complete. We really want to get them to show their interest and to raise their hand. Ultimately, what our goal needs to be is to get that student on our list. As of today, we are 281 days from September 1st, which means we have 281 days from the beginning of that student's potential freshman year in order to win them from an inquiry, from a senior inquiry or an underclassman in order to raise their hand. That's a lot of time, but in some cases it's not a lot of time, but we want to get them on our list. And relative to underclassmen specifically, what we really want to do is walk them through these potentially four conversion points. And we're not going to hit on all four of them because obviously the application is a ways down the road when it opens in August. But what we want to do is really get them to show us who they are, identify who they are on your website, and then convert them through to an inquiry, to a potentially to a visitor, or in this case, maybe to a digital visitor. These are the kind of standard conversion. I'll call them standard conversion moments for underclassmen, but there are some other things for seniors that we talked about in the other webinar. So just a shameless plug to go back and listen to the other webinar. So how do we do this at Capture? You might be asking yourself, okay, Jamie, like I get it, right? The SAT and the ACT have been a little light this year. Their administrations are down. Although they are getting back to the kind of the volumes that they expect. How do we get a student to identify who they are? And what I would recommend to you is to not look to some new, I would say unvalidated technique. Instead, let's go to your website, because your website is ultimately the traffic that it actually has the traffic that you need to make your class and certainly to build your inquiry pool. It's really just about tactics to get there. So what I'm showing here on the screen, and I made this an actual faux state college, which is Capture's fake university. I made this nice and large so that way I didn't have to block anything out and like cover up any like school names and stuff like that, in order to show you the power of what we call a progressive identification form. So this is a perfect way to actually harvest students from your website. So this is this is a mechanism to show to a current user on your website in order to get them to give you information and essentially to raise their hand in an environment where getting student leads, it might be a little bit more difficult. So you might be asking yourself right now, well, Jamie, that's like a crazy form with all sorts of weird fields on it and things that I might not need. Well, that's true. Good news for you is that these forms that we use on our clients' website pages, deployed on their .edu page, are specific to the information needs that they have. This is one that we created as a mock-up, actually, that could be used for grabbing parent information or trying to engage with in a different way with students. But there are other more traditional mechanisms of, name and cohort year and things like that. And the response of these forms is incredible. Like, this is a great way to build your inquiry pipeline because it shows to the audience that you want to show it to. So here is an the actual results of a campaign that we ran for a partner. A 30-day campaign showed 962 times, 72 students submitted a form, and of those forms, 59 were organic, which means they were people who were not in the CRM already. Ultimately, these tend to, on average, depending on the type of institution, they tend to have a 50 to 80% kind of organic rate, meaning that you have this incredible capability of pulling in new leads off your current website, which is really quite simple. And you can differentiate where these show up and in what URLs and things like that. I'm really revved up, Sarah, and I'm really sorry.
No, you're good. No, I do want to point out one thing with these progressive ID forms that you sort of touched on is, you get better rates when you keep them shorter. So, stick to the information that you definitely need because you want to remove as many barriers as possible to get those completed. So, you have someone show up on the website and they're interested, but they're not going to want to fill out a whole bunch of different fields. So just stick to the minimums and you'll see those rates go up a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. I think that having the non-negotiables that you need for record creation in your CRM are the critical parts. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that even needs to be questioned whether or not you actually need something. I used to work at an institution that said they needed to have street address in order for a record to be created, which I disagreed with, but it became a thing. But the great part about progressive ID forms too is that this is first party data collection, right? This is the ability to go out and get for yourself without, relying on a third source. You're able to qualify this yourself. The student's giving it to your institution. They know they're doing it. They're giving consent with doing it. And it makes it a very valuable point of identification so that you can use that forward. And also, you can build on the preferences over time. This is called progressive identification for a reason. So you can actually build the student's profile of information and use that later on in order to personalize some of the back end flow, if that was something that was a goal for you.
Right. So, and the best part about this is that you know that those people are interested.
Absolutely. That's what we love. We love seeing people who are interested. So as we've talked about, with our search capability for underclassmen kind of being limited, what we also want to do, and also that being limited and our on-campus deployments being limited, what we also want to be able to do is convert that student from a hand-raising underclassman saying, yeah, I'm interested in looking at Faux State University, to then taking a deeper dive into some of the content. So for the listeners, let me kind of walk you through what this path looks like. As your student does that action, that interaction, or the prospect does that interaction and becomes a hand raiser, we then start to build a profile on the back end in Capture World and start to understand where are they going on your website and what are they doing. And we do that as a user protection mechanism, so that way we're not just like throwing information at a prospect that doesn't make sense for them. So in this case, let's refer back to the progressive ID. Let's say that it shows that the student is interested in fall 22. They're very early to the process. We don't have a lot of web traffic for them, so they're kind of new to the website. They fill that out. They abandon and then come back a couple of days later. Then something like this shows up that says, oh, this is for a student who lives out of the state of the institution. It's going to show for an underclassman who hasn't yet visited. And we really have the ability to cater it's curated content to the people who need it. So that's really the exciting part, I think, about marketing automation as we do it at Capture, is that it's very much filling the need and almost in a preemptive way, answering the questions for those students who are coming to your website. Sarah, do you have any thoughts? Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. It goes back to what you were saying earlier about making all of your content personalized. You can personalize that journey based on what they have been looking at on your website or what they've actually identified in those progressive identification forms as far as their interests.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And that's like such a key to Gen Z, which we'll talk about in just a little while. Okay, so here we go. This is the raw moment everyone's been waiting for. Sarah, if you had to give some pointers for underclassmen campaigns on the creative side, or maybe it's an admissions leader who wants to talk to their Marcom department, like what would be some of the words of wisdom that you would impart to those folks?
So one of the main things that I would say is consistency. You want to be consistent in your brand. You want to be consistent in your messaging. So making sure that everything has a similar look and feel, and that the message really coincides with each piece that you're putting out. You want prospects, when they see an ad somewhere on another website, or even some kind of an interaction on your own website, that it all feels like it's from the same place. And you want them to become familiar with you as they start to see these pieces throughout their journey. The other thing is, it's kind of related to this, know your message and know your personality and really lean into that. Mm-hmm. So you want to know who you are as an institution, and you want to be able to show that off as much as possible. A lot of these underclassmen, they're still trying to figure out what they want to do and where they would want to go to school. So show them why you're unique and really lean into that as much as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to dig into that a little bit more as we talk in the final point, or with the final section of this. But I totally agree with you. I think that this is a very unique opportunity. And the good part about underclassmen is that they are responsive, right? They're not used like, as opposed to a senior that's really being inundated with lots of messaging that's, it continues to come. Underclassmen, they find it novel, and they're getting new information for them. So be able to capitalize on that and build that loyalty early on. So that way you can see that process through a little bit further. We're going to transition now. Transfers are one of my favorite topics only because I think transfers are so critical. I transferred as a student, and I think that with some of the changes that we've been a part of in the last year, I guess I have to say a little over a year because that was when the NACAC changes happened. It's been such a weird year to remember. That transfers are going to become an increasingly strategic part of the puzzle. And if you haven't I've said this before in a webinar, I probably said it on the phone to a lot of meetings that I've been in. If institutions have not taken time yet to reevaluate your transfer strategy post NACAC changes of 2019, then you need to. I feel like actually the pandemic kind of gave everyone a little bit of a buy when it came to being able to respond to transfers because everyone was trying to respond to so many other things. But literally transfers are a big thing. And they have historically changed a lot, like a whole lot. So when I was a director of admissions, one of the biggest hurdles for me was really just figuring out where do the transfers come from that feed the pipeline. It's sourcing. I had to have articulation agreements and make a lot of community college visits and all these kind of things. Now, currently, I think a lot of it is right now, it's like figuring out where the transfers are, like whether that's thinking of geo-targeting campaigns where we would normally put a campaign over top of a community college, which might not be in person right now, or wondering where that 9% of community college students have gone that didn't show up to community college this fall. So really understanding where are they located. And if I'm really going to give a future cast, I think the next hurdle with transfers is really trying to figure out how do we integrate credentialing and certificate programs and things like that into the transcripting process. But we're going to save that one for another day that is not today. My recommendations whenever I talk to someone about transfers is to really think through what can we do in order to rebuild or build transfer campaigns with what we have. So one of the things that we talk about a lot within the capture sphere, as I like to call it, is to really re-engage previous cycle cohorts. So you have a whole pool in your CRM of students who did not enroll at your institution. Now, do your due diligence, go to the clearinghouse, figure out who you're really competing with, who you lost students to, etc. But that's not the only step. Like that, if you stop there, you've done some of your homework, but you haven't done all of it. And you really need to bring those students back in because the moment that they don't enroll is the moment that they become a transfer prospect for future years. And fall 21 might be the year that you really want to go after some of these, maybe the fall 18, fall 19, fall 20 students who didn't end up coming. So build the campaigns, part of digital really is having a relevant drip campaign and really understanding how do we put in these transactional moments along with outcomes-based stories so that you're really selling your purpose. Use predictive modeling in order to allocate those in order to allocate those digital efforts, and then really think through how are we giving attribution. But let's go back up to even email drip campaigns and things like that. Sara, what can you tell us about the process or what you all do on our creative side in order to build that out?
Yeah, so a lot of it is really about removing those roadblocks, making sure that they know that the process to transfer can be pretty seamless and pretty easy. Making sure that those students know that the institution is there to help them, so it doesn't seem like it's such a daunting task. And the other thing is to really just meet them wherever they are. If they're 1-2 years in at another institution, why should they want to transfer to your institution? And this goes back again to knowing your personality and kind of showing them who you are and why they would want to be there.
Yeah, those are great points. And I think thinking through, being able to emphasize how big is your transfer population? What's that community look like? And if there's any sort of peer-to-peer interaction that you can get, it's so helpful to do. Sara, this is a technique here, paid social prospecting. You want to talk us through what this looks like?
Yeah, so in this particular instance, this is a lookalike campaign. So what we're doing here is we're taking data that you already have and we're trying to find users on social media that kind of fit a similar profile. So these are students or prospects that are most likely to be interested in your institution. The thing that really works here is one, we're also removing those roadblocks when we're talking about seamless transition and making things easy. And we're also being consistent in our branding and our styling. So, obviously it's going to have your logo and it shows that it's a sponsored post, but you're also bringing in different types of photography and imagery, as well as a little flourish here and there just to make sure that you're recognizable to the people that you're trying to reach out to.
Yeah, a little flair like that. I don't know what
Yeah.
movie it was, but like that guy who had all the, like when you're at TGI Fridays.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that, I love this concept because, again, getting back to that historical roadblock of transfer enrollment, like sourcing is a big thing, and I would even go so far as to say having doing qualified sourcing is also difficult. We're all familiar with the transfer sources that are out there, and the ability to pre-qualify is huge in order to give them relevance into your pipeline. And that's exactly what paid social prospecting, this form of digital banner campaigns essentially can do, because you can build that lead generation. And as you can see there, I want to point out that 1.47, that click-through rate might not seem powerful, but in the world of digital campaigns, that is extraordinarily good. It's like off the charts good, because you're getting almost 300 people to click on an ad. That's really a 30-day-old ad. It's crazy to think about getting 300 potential transfer leads in that sort of a period. And we're going to talk again, showing the same concept on the progressive identification side. Also can be done for transfers. Now, this offers a huge amount of relevance, because we can, like I said before, we can plant progressive identification forms and other forms of marketing automation in the environment where transfer students are. For those of you who are listening, one of the things you probably know about transfer students is that their patience level is very short, and we want to be able to get them the information they need, be able to bring it to them and move them forward. And as you can see here, much like in the previous progressive identification form, 25 of the 29 submissions here were not in the CRM. So moving from identification to conversion, we also want to really think through, what do we do to get them to move to that next step? How can we do that? So it can be done just in very similar ways to progressive IDs. We can populate toasters and popovers in your website environment, but we also can display digital ads that are outside the scope and in other areas to drive them back. So whether it's retargeting or to a list of, maybe a list of your previous cohorts that you're looking to convert into an application for this year, there's all sorts of ways to do it. Again, I'm gonna breeze through this because I'm running up on time, as I always do. But you can see the results there from 2 weeks. There's 41 clicks through to the to the landing page where we're doing this. It's a way above average. It's an incredible way that we use digital campaigns in order to convert transfers to where we want them to be in the pipeline. Sara, really quickly, give us pointers for the transfer population.
Yeah, so for transfers, one of the big things is to show them what they're missing by not being at your institution. They're already familiar with who you are. So, the overall branding, you want it still to be consistent, but you don't need to lean as heavily into the overall general branding because they're familiar with you. So show them what they're missing, and then, kind of tell the story of, who we are, but do you really know who we are? And this is your opportunity to showcase some of those more unique points that you wouldn't necessarily want to lead with someone who's never heard of your institution. But since they're familiar, you can just jump right in and go for it.
Absolutely. Very good things to think about. All right, the last section we're going to really hit on, which is a very short section, and I'm actually going to skip one of the slides in it, is to really think through the bigger picture here. Gen Z is certainly a generation that is bigger picture. They're a group of students who are interested in being a part of what matters, being a part of something that's bigger than they are. And so I would encourage you, if you're listening in today, think about the modalities and let's talk about shaking it up. Some of the great campaigns that we see are the ones that are driving to student blogs that are basically building communities in an online modality. So being in the right places makes a big difference. We have to remember that these students are digital natives and they really have an anticipation and expectation to have things come in a digital format. Now, I will say one of the things I've been thinking about recently is like, what is the role of like traditional media in this like oversaturated digital age? Like I'm thinking of the COVID era where everything is online. There could be a place for like strategic print driven by, predictive modeling and things like that. But you can contact me if you have questions about how to do that better. But really think about how do you build that brand loyalty, being in the right places and switching up the modalities into a manner that really makes a difference. Sara, am going to skip this slide. You all will have that for a. We were going to really kind of do a little bit of a freestyle, and Sara was going to really throw down some rhymes here and talk through like how do we do this with Gen Z. We're like 1 minute 30 seconds already over time, so I'm going to switch that up and go to creating your digital parfait. You can read through these bullet points, but the key here is to make sure that you're making an impact in what you're doing. Be quick, think about affordability, making sure that you're really covering the bases as much as you can, but integrating the things that are going to have a resounding impact to Gen Z. And I like to think of a parfait because I think any good digital strategy is really like a good parfait, right? It's got a lot of layers. Some of them are thick, some of them are thin, some of them are crunchy, some of them are creamy. It's really making this very tempting piece for that prospect to look at and to kind of be a part of. So that is, man, I feel like I can't believe that 30 minutes has gone by already.
I know.
It's like I snap and it happens. So I really want to thank you, Sara, for spending some time with me. To our audience out there, I'm so happy that you spent time with us. If there are questions that you have about what we've shared, if you have questions about Capture's marketing automation or predictive modeling, please contact me. My email's right there. Or you can go to our website and check out some of the other things that we've done. Have a great Thanksgiving, everyone, and we'll talk to you again soon.